and let's see what we could do. So inshallah, I'm going to call upon Shaykh Abdul Hakim quick. He's a PhD. Shaykh Abdullah is the senior lecturer with Islamic Institute of Toronto, that is in here. Shaykh Abdullah has accomplished a lifetime worth of achievement, spanning many continents while enlightening the lives of millions. He has traveled more than 34 countries on lecture and educational tours. He was born in United States of America and accepted Islam in Canada in 1970. He pursued his study of Islam at the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia, where he graduated and received an ijazah from the College of Dawah, Islamic Science in 1979. He is one of the two students to do so from the West, a great achievement, my dear respected brothers and sisters. He later completed a master's degree and a doctorate in African history at the University of Toronto in Canada. Respected ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shaykh Abdullah Hakim quick.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala jamii al-anbiya'i wa mursaleen wa ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. All praises are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon all of the prophets and righteous ones from the beginning of time. Peace and blessings to Abraham, to Moses, to Jesus, to Muhammad, and all those righteous messengers. And I begin with the greeting words of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. These are the words of peace. And it is my prayer that tonight would be a source of peace and a source of understanding. And at the outset, on behalf of the Islamic Institute of Toronto, hosting the event with the Sri Lankan Muslim community, and also on behalf of the Council of Islamic Theologians of Canada, I want to express complete solidarity with the people of Canada in the face of the recent tragedies that have happened in Ottawa and in Quebec. I want to express this solidarity, to express our shock at what happened in our beautiful country, and to lift up our voice and let everybody know that we also will be standing on guard for peace and security in this country. I also want to express to our guests that are here tonight and to remind our brothers and sisters that we are in a very critical time in the history of humanity. There is a lot of tension in the world. The geopolitical situation has pitted nations against each other. Humanity has developed the ability to take life like never before. But at the same time, humanity has developed the ability to share information, to share the knowledge of the past, bring it to the present, and then look toward the future. And so tonight is another one of the events happening in Islamic History Month in Canada, in the month of October. It's another event to share information and, as our brothers and sisters in Ceylon have put forward, to build bridges. To build bridges. One of the most important foundations of a bridge, the type of bridge that we're building, it's not over a river. It's a bridge between cultures, between religions, between races. One of the important foundations of that bridge is knowledge. The knowledge of actually what has happened to each group and to each religion. In the history department of the University of Toronto, they taught us, if you want to understand a phenomena, then go to primary sources. You have to go right to the essence of the phenomena itself. And so tonight, I want to build some bridges to take us through an understanding of what is Islam. What is the relationship of Muslims to other great prophets, especially in the Judeo-Christian understanding? And this is an important bridge because people will say, how are Muslims loyal to Canada? How are Muslims concerned about the welfare of people who come from other religions, especially Judaism and Christianity? How are Muslims placed in this international understanding? We have to go right back to the essence of Islam itself. If we look at the word Islam, it comes from the Arabic language. Arabic is one of the oldest languages, or part of the oldest language group in the world, Semitic languages. In it there is Hebrew, there is Amharic, spoken in Ethiopia. It's an ancient group. In this understanding, the word Islam means peace. It is a way of peace through submission and surrender. In the religious sense, it means submission to the will of Allah. And these words are being thrown around today. You see the word Islamic being used. Islamic bank, Islamic state, Islamic food. What does the word actually mean? Allah. What does Allah actually mean? It's important for us to remind ourselves who we are and also to share it with other people. The word Allah means God with a capital G. It is not, you can't pluralize it like gods. You can't make it feminine like goddess. Allah is not masculine or feminine, but we believe Allah is the original creator who initiated life. And that has been expressed in all languages. A Muslim is merely one who submits to the will of Allah. It has nothing to do with your nationality, your language, or your culture. The word Muslim is a mispronunciation of Arabic. It's not an offensive word, but you'll see it being used. Muhammadan, however, is a misunderstanding, because that means that we only relate to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but we believe that prophets and messengers were sent to every nation, every tribe on the face of the planet. Saracen is another word thrown out being used for Muslims, but the word Saracen used in the Middle Ages, it comes from the word Sharqiyun, or Easterner, the people from the East. But now we know that Muslims make up over 26% of the Earth's population. For us, there is no East or West or North or South. We are part of the human family. Another word, too, is Islamist. This is also a rejected word by us, because in its essence, it only means somebody who practices Islam. But how it is being used, there's a negative understanding, and that's part of the clearing up of definitions that it is our duty to make. I want to show you something about the word. One of my friends was traveling in the Middle East, and he went to a hotel in Jordan, and like many hotels have a Bible in the hotel. So they had a Bible in this hotel, but it was in Arabic language. So he opened up the Bible. You'll see it on the screen. That's the first page of the Bible. In English, we call it Genesis. And Genesis begins by saying, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In Arabic, they say, Fil bed khalaqallahu samawati wal ard. So it's a direct translation. But the interesting point that my friend found out, that Christians, Arabic-speaking Christians, when they mention the word God, and you'll see it on the first page, 6 times the word Allah is mentioned. So therefore, Allah is not a name which is special to Muslims, but it is an expression of anybody who is speaking the Arabic language. To understand what a Muslim is, again, is to go to the definition. A Muslim only means somebody with certain qualities. You can't put a color on a Muslim. You can't put a language. You can't put a particular passport or nationality. It's just somebody who wants to submit to the will of God and have certain qualities. And the word Islam distinguishes itself from other great religions because the names of the great religions are generally taken from the name of the founder of the religion, like Buddha, Buddhism, Christ, Christianity, Zoroaster, Zoroastrianism, Judah or Judea, Judaism, right, the place or the people, Hinduism. This is where you can see the word Islam actually is what they call a generic word. It is a broad-based word. It is not particular to any race. This is an important understanding because stereotyping is where you take certain qualities of a group or an individual and you place it upon the whole group itself. So a Muslim is one who recognizes all of the prophets of monotheism, the ones who taught the belief in one God. Probably the best prophet in bridge building is the prophet Abraham. Abraham came from Iraq, the Tigris and Euphrates, according to our teachings, and he crossed into Syria, down into Palestine, Egypt, with his wife Sarah. Sarah could not have children at that point in her life. When they reached Egypt, the Egyptians gave them a servant. The ruling class in Egypt at that time was also from Iraq, and they gave them a servant, an Egyptian woman whose name was Hajar, or in English they say Hagar. In Genesis, I'm quoting the Bible now, we want to build bridges. Where do we fit in the Judeo-Christian understanding? In Genesis 16:3, it says, and Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abraham to be his wife. So therefore, Hagar or Hajar was the wife of Abraham, given by Sarah. And what is interesting for us in this genealogy is that Hagar had a son. The son's name was Ishmael or Ismail. He is the first of the sons of Abraham. An interesting story comes about in Genesis from the Bible, 16:16, and it says, and Abram was 86 years when Hagar had Ismail. That's when the son came. We follow the story and we look into Psalms. This is also in the Bible. And it's talking about the journey of Abraham and Hagar or Hajar and Ismail. It said, who passing through the valley of Becca. The Bible is using the word Becca. Make it a well. The rain filleth the pools. The word Becca appears in the Quran also. For the word Mecca, the Quran says Bekkata Mubarakah. Becca is the original pronunciation of the word Mecca. So therefore, Mecca or Becca actually appears in the Bible itself. When you look at the story of Abraham again, you will see in Genesis, you'll see that Abraham was 100 years old, his wife around the same age, and the son Isaac was born. 100 years old. Now that side of the family is well known to the Western world. On that side, from Isaac came Jacob. His nickname was Israel or Israel. He had 12 sons, the 12 children or 12 tribes of Israel. From those tribes came Moses, and from them also came Jesus. Peace be upon them both. And so this is the bridge now. And this is well known to the Western world. But what is not so well known is what happened on the other side of the family. On the other side of the bridge, if you look at the side of Hagar, remember the son Ishmael is the first son. His great-great-great-great-grandson, born in the year 570 AD, is Muhammad. So therefore, according to genealogy, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad are cousins. And I believe if they were here tonight, they would embrace one another, and they would not look for differences between themselves. What are the duties of a Muslim? What happens in a mosque? There are mosques coming up all over the GTA. The main duties of Muslims have to do with the 5 activities or pillars of Islam. There is the Shahada, which is the testimony to the belief in one God, and so we spend a lot of time trying to understand our relationship with God and with Allah. There is also Salat, prayer, that happens 5 times a day. There is also Zakah, and that is the welfare contribution. So it is part of the duty of Muslims to give to the poor and the needy from the wealth that they have gained. Fasting, which takes place in the month of Ramadan. You'll see all of the mosques are filled with people in the month of Ramadan. And Hajj, which has just been completed, the pilgrimage to Mecca, which we try to make once in a lifetime. These are the main activities of Muslims. The whole structure of our community is based around these activities. There are a number of other issues, and I want to be very brief because of time, but for our guests' sake and to remind ourselves, we do believe in an afterlife. We do believe that this life will end with death, a transition into the next world. We also believe, or we also celebrate holidays. Our main holidays, Eid al-Fitr at the end of Ramadan and Eid al-Adha during the pilgrimage season. Sexuality, which is a big issue in the world today. Muslims believe very strongly in marriage, in modesty, and there is a dress code for male and for female. Halal food. Halal only means permissible food. It is sacrificed in a particular way. We also don't drink alcohol or take drugs except for medicinal purposes. Tonight, inshallah, God willing, you're going to get a taste of some beautiful Sri Lankan halal food. And everybody's waiting for this, who has come from a long time. War and peace. This is a big issue in the world. They use the word jihad. And I want to be very clear that the word jihad does not mean holy war. There is nowhere in our scriptures that it means. Jihad means a struggle against evil things. There's a struggle within ourselves. There's a struggle in our families, in our societies, in the world. This is the actual meaning of the terminology. Hijab is another issue. Look at the screen. Who is the woman on the left side? Does anybody know? That is a depiction of Mary, the mother of Jesus, peace be upon them both. What does she have on? Hijab. Who is the woman in the middle? That's Mother Teresa, one of the most famous Christian women of the 20th century. What does she have on? Hijab. Who is the woman on the right? That is a Muslim sister. What does she have on? Hijab. So hijab is not a political statement. It is not a revolution. It is not a fashion trend. It is only trying to please the Creator through modesty. I want to look at Muslims in Canada. Again, we've established now that Muslims are a broad-based community. Anybody who believes in one God, in the root definition of Islam, we believe is a Muslim. And based on this, if we look at Canada, from its early inception, the original people who came from Russia, the Bering Straits, over 15,000 years ago, and settled here in the Americas, many of the nations amongst the First Nation people had a clear understanding of monotheism. So monotheism, we believe, is not something special to the Middle East. Prophets came to China, prophets came to India, prophets came to Africa, prophets came to Europe, prophets came to the Americas, right here in Canada. And when Jacques Cartier, the first Western European to come, he was not the first European, because we know the Vikings landed on the shores of Newfoundland centuries before Cartier and Columbus. But in 1534, he met a nation called Micmac, and they are the First Nation people that you'll find on the eastern coast of Canada. From the writings of the Grand Council of the Micmac Nation that have been published, coming from 1986, we find the word Niskam. I was surprised to find in the writings of the Micmac, and this is a picture of the actual Micmac people, right? You can see their dress, very similar to the dress in many parts of the Muslim world. Niskam is a very important word. This goes along with what the Quran, the book and scripture of the Muslims, says, that we certainly sent to every nation a messenger saying worship Allah and avoid false deities. Okay? It's a clear inscription. This might be a little difficult to see, but if you look in the middle, the second line from the bottom toward the middle, you'll see the word Niskam. These are the pictograph writings of the Micmac nation, and the word Niskam is clear. It's translated into German to mean God. So this is a clear understanding amongst the First Nations people. When we look at Canada in its history to understand more about Muslims, we have to go way back. We have to go way back. Let's go back to 1791. Many of you may not be aware of what Canada used to look like. And at that time, the eastern side of our country, this is what made up Canada itself. At that time, in the early period, at that time, from 1871, let me go back here, 1871, now you'll see in green Ontario and Quebec. Okay, you see Canada now developing. And by 1871 now, where were Muslims? Were they in Saudi Arabia? Were they in Sri Lanka? Were they in Egypt? No. They were also in Canada. According to Canadian records, in 1871, John and Martha Simons, who they call Mahometans, that's the middle-aged name for Muslims, they came from the US and they settled in Ontario. And the official census of Muslims in the province of Ontario in 1871 was 17. In 1854, James Love was born, the first recorded Muslim born in Canada. Later on, again, this is 19th century, Canada expanded. It expanded to the west. And the Hudson Bay Company, one of the strongest or richest companies in the world, who controlled the Northwest Territories, they sold these territories to Canada. At that time, the population of Canada was only about 3.7 million. Look at the country. If you look at the orange section, that's the Northwest Territories. So at that time, the Hudson Bay Company sold the Northwest Territories to the Canadian government, and now Canada had a huge territory, and they wanted to expand, so an expansion began. On this expansion, settlers were needed. The British government from the 16th century had an excellent relationship with the Ottoman Turkish Empire. It is reported that the British and the Ottomans were actually struggling against the Spanish. The British eventually defeated the Spanish Armada. And so the good relationships continued with the Ottomans. And so the Canadian government then opened up immigration to the Ottoman Empire, and so light-skinned Muslims came from the Ottoman Empire. Albanian, Bosnian, Turkish, Syrian, Lebanese. They were on the wagon trains that settled in the Midwest of Canada. That is the reason why the oldest mosque, which is established and running up until now, was established in December 12, 1938, Al-Rashid Mosque, not in Ontario, in Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta. And for those of you who read the translation of the Quran by Yusuf Ali came from London. He was the MC of the program that night. Look at that history we have. He was the MC of the program in the opening of the first mosque. But the presence continued. And when you go to the 20th century, especially the last part of the 20th century, this is where an explosion in population began. Canada opened its doors to the world. 1971, the population, Muslim population in Canada was estimated to be 33,000. Look at the expansion. By 1981, it went from 33 to 98,000 Muslims. Skilled workers, professionals, teachers, students, technocrats, business people. Between 1981, now look at, it goes to 1991, 235,000 Muslims. Look at the expansion. And we know, according to our own census, our actual population is about 2 to 3 times this. But we'll go with the official records for technical purposes. So 1991, 235. By 2001, 579,740 Muslims, 2% of Canada's population. By 2006, 783,000 Muslims. We're expanding, not necessarily through immigration alone. We have a lot of babies. And so we naturally grow and grow. Allah blessed us. As the Prophet ﷺ said, this will be the largest nation on the day of resurrection. And so our babies continued, along with our brothers and sisters. By 2011, 940,000 Muslims. In the GTA, we were 10%. And it is projected that by the year 2030, Muslims will make about 2.7 million people in the population of Canada. It's a huge number. There are great challenges that are in front of us. I want to remind you about some of the challenges that we think about these. We talk to our children. We reach out to the society, build bridges, because these challenges are not going to go away. The present situation, approximately 1 million Muslims in Canada, or more, probably around 2. The Muslim population to triple by the year 2030. Canadian Muslims have a higher birth rate than the average birth rate in society. Toronto has the largest percentage of Muslims in the whole of North America. It's in the GTA. About 60% of the Muslims are in Ontario. This is a big challenge to us. What are some of the points? Islamophobia. Islamophobia. That is the fear of the image of Muslims. People have fear for many things which are established. They have a thing called arachnophobia, if you're afraid of a spider. But this is coming through the media, through Hollywood, through a number of misunderstandings. There is now Islamophobia in the land, and we need to struggle with this by opening up our doors, holding hands with people of conscience within our society to defeat this evil of Islamophobia. But there are opposing views. There are some, as on the right side, they push Islamophobia. But there are some people, especially in Canada, who do not agree with this, who recognize that no nation should be stigmatized. Nobody should be stereotyped. People should be judged according to their deeds, their merits. And we need to show it by our deeds that we are an important part of Canadian society. Drugs, alcoholism, it is a reality amongst our younger generation. Drug wars are happening in some of our communities, and we will have to face this struggle. Islamophobia, drugs, economic problems, it is causing great stress. It is causing depression. There is a lot of depression in our communities, and our social workers, psychiatrists, professionals have to be prepared to handle this depression in our community. It's a very important issue that we have to struggle with. That's why we need a positive approach. Go out, open up the doors, be transparent, reach out to society. The children have peer pressure on them to wear certain clothes, to talk in a certain way. There's an identity crisis. It's an identity crisis. This is why it's a beautiful thing to have a Sri Lankan Muslim gathering. Teach the children your native language as well as Arabic and English. Never forget your roots, but connect yourself with the rest of the Muslims from all over the world. There's a conflict going on between the younger generation and parents, and this is a great challenge to us. So we need to make the masjid, the mosque, and the Islamic Center more available to younger people in our society. What are the solutions? Education. Education, education. It is so important that we educate ourselves in our religion, what Islam really is, and we also educate ourselves with the skills that this society can provide to us. Education can take a person out of depression. Education can help a person in their identity crisis. Education can make us understand that Islamophobia will not stay here. It's only temporary. This education leads to empowerment. That means you become strong. You go out to society. Don't be afraid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power over all things. And finally, engagement. Engagement. It's no longer enough to build a mosque and stay inside and make our prayers. We have to come out to society. And with this, I congratulate the Sri Lankan associations, the Islamic Institute of Toronto, all of those groups that in this month of Islamic History Month are reaching out to society to share information about our great religion. And we can only pray that Almighty God Allah would bless you, bless this society, give the leaders the vision to take us, this society, from darkness into light, and keep Canada strong, keep Muslims strong, and all people who are hurting and oppressed. May Allah help them in their oppression. May Allah help the weak in this world. And may Allah unite us regardless of our color, regardless of our religion, regardless of our language. I leave you with these thoughts, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, with his valuable thoughts and insights. I'm sure everybody, young and old, would have heard this for the first time, or even it's enlightening us with so many information, alhamdulillah. And I'm sure all those information is available. You can go to his website, Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick. I've seen there's a lot of resources, so we can go in there as well, and I'm sure he will, but you can contact him directly, even you can talk to him. And Doctor, I would really like to say the last three things which you told us, the solutions. And I'm sure all the organizations who are the forefront in the Sri Lankan community, who are in the forefront, who are doing as much as possible to make this community, to integrate it with the fabric of the Canadian society, that we will definitely take those things especially in terms of education, empowerment, and engagement. I think it's a very good 3 E's which we all have to think, especially at corporate level or at organizational level, as well as in our families. As he clearly said, we have a lot of issues and a lot of stress coming from the families. So these things, inshallah, I hope all brothers, sisters, young and old alike, will take these things into account and then benefit from his speech, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. And as a token of appreciation, just like everybody, inshallah, I'm calling upon our President, Canada, Sri Lanka Muslim Association, Brother Zafran Elur, to present the token of appreciation to Dr. Abdul Hakim Quick.